The following article, which I will read out, has been published on Unser Politik blog. It shows that mankind has so much challenges to solve in regarding the impacts of the magnetic pole reservoir on Earth that mankind just simply cannot afford a final battle according to the Armageddon story. And in addition to that, there are strong pieces of evidence suggesting that the Armageddon story itself has been inspired by experiences of mankind with a former magnetic reversal. I now will read it out. Surviving the magnetic pole excursion instead of a final battle for Armageddon cargo. The Earth's magnetic field is continuously weakening and is heading towards a pole reversal in the form of a pole excursion similar to the Laschamp event. The effects of the weakening Earth's magnetic field on humans and today also on technology, as well as the natural disasters that occurred, at least temporarily, in connection with it, decimated humanity and caused the extinction of animal species during past pole reversals, leading people to interpret these events as the end of the world or as a transition to a new world. But the survivors had to repair or rebuild their social structures and supplies on the same planet Earth. Today, with our technology, we face more challenges in this situation, but also more opportunities to preserve the lives of as many people and as many habitats on Earth as possible. Among the challenges is the increased risk of major power outages, leading to the destruction of technical facilities and consequences for the refrigeration and transport of food, electronic money, lighting, heating, gas stations, government services, water supply, communications, electronic property registers, the internet, nuclear power plant cooling, and security. We are experiencing an increase in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, but we do not know how far this will increase, particularly whether the reduction in sunlight caused by volcanic eruptions will lead to a new ice age. We will also need massive numbers of workers for disaster relief, especially to repeatedly repair the destruction caused by natural disasters, mitigating the consequences of its ever-decreasing power, limiting the loss of human life, nature and technology, and avoiding a technological regression to the Stone Age urgently requires international cooperation, especially in research, reforestation, and disaster preparedness. Instead, there are efforts most clearly visible in the current war of aggression against Iran to bring about the final battle prophesied in the Armageddon narrative right now. A revelation is neither an instruction nor an authorization for humans to play God and to enforce their interpretation of the revelation. There is strong evidence to suggest that the Armageddon story itself arose from humanity's experience with the previous magnetic reversal. In a situation where preserving as much life of our civilization on Earth as possible requires significant effort, including a great deal of human labor, we clearly cannot afford an additional mass destruction of life orchestrated by ideologically driven individuals through a final battle. The freedoms of religion and of ideology are invulnerable but not inviolable. They are limited to their realization, in particular, where even more sensible rights like peace, life, human dignity, and health are at stake. And it particularly does not make any sense in a high-tech society with nuclear armament to bring about the destruction of the, according to the religions, perfect creation and of the physical existence also of all believers, by a final battle for the presumptuous enforcement of individual prophecies, or to silently accept that out of political convenience in a situation when collective activity to alleviate the impacts of the magnetic reversal is required. Those humans who play God and who try to cause a final battle instead of doing good with humility, of caring for the human beings, and of preserving as much as possible of the wonderful divine creation also in times of magnetic reversal, need to be tried before the ICC for Article 7, Paragraph 1, lit A, B, H, and K Rome Statute, and for Article 8, BIS Rome Statute, and perhaps also for Article 6 Rome Statute, so that they experience, according to the rule of the law and appropriately, already here on earth, their own final judgment instead of destroying everything. This text is also a contribution to the defense of the human rights according to UN Resolution 53/144 and has been written in the awareness that, according to Article 1, Paragraph 2 Basic Law, the German people, because of the inviolable human dignity, are committed to invulnerable and inalienable human rights as a foundation of every human community of peace and of justice in the world. The quotations and sources contained in this text serve to support the argumentation presented here. It cannot be inferred from this that the author of this text agrees with all the views of the author cited and vice versa. A cyclical geophysical event and its consequences. The Earth's magnetic field exists due to the magnetic effect of magma flows in the Earth's interior. Changes in these magma flows have led to many reversals between the magnetic north and south poles throughout Earth's history. When these reversals persist for a long time, they are called magnetic pole shifts. Far more common, however, are polar excursions, in which the magnetic poles exchange positions again within centuries. One of the latest known polar excursions was the Laschamp event. The Earth is protected from cosmic radiation by its own magnetic field and by the Sun's magnetic field called heliosphere, and it is protected by its own magnetic field from the magnetic and energetic effects of solar storms directed towards Earth. In the years before and after magnetic reversal, the Earth's magnetic field has always been very weak. The fact that it has been decreasing at an accelerating rate for decades indicates that a pole reversal is imminent. Reasons for the accelerated decline of the Earth's magnetic field include the re-entry of our solar system into a cosmic cloud formed by the explosion of a star, which is traversed by our solar system cyclically and which exerts an energetic influence on Earth, and motions in the geographic poles caused by the drainage of the continents, which in turn has affected magma flows and thus the Earth's magnetic field. In 1859, the Earth's magnetic field had a strength of 100%, 90% in 2000, 85% in 2010, 75% in 2020, and approximately 70% in 2023, and note 1. The study, Planetophysical State of Earth and Life, by Professor Dr. Alexei N. Dmitriev, was published in Russian in IACA Transactions, Volume 4, 1997, and Note 2. Even then, it recognized that, quote, highly charged matter and energetic irregularities in interstellar space, which have penetrated the interplanetary space of our solar system, a kind of donation of matter and energy from interplanetary space to our solar system, quote, and have altered the energy states of our sun and the planets of our solar system and have led to, quote, irreversible planetary physical changes, quote, end on Earth. This refers to the effect of high-energy cosmic supernova cloud formed by the explosion of another star, which is cyclically traversed by our solar system and into which it last entered in the 1990s. The effects on Earth, quote, are evident in the acceleration of magnetic pole drift, in the vertical and horizontal distribution of ozone levels, and in the increase in the frequency and severity of major catastrophic climate events, quote end. The study prognosticates, quote, that we are moving toward a period of rapid temperature instability similar to that of 10,000 years ago, quote end, that a complete change in the species composition on Earth could occur, and that the emergence of an altered natural balance requires an understanding of the fundamental ecological changes. At the time of the study, changes in the magnetic fields of Uranus, Neptune, and Jupiter were already observable, section 1.1 of the study. An acceleration in the drift of the Earth's magnetic poles was already present before the entry into the cosmic cloud and has intensified since then, section 2.2. Due to the weakening of Earth's magnetic field, immense amounts of additional energy from the cosmic cloud, the former supernova, flow into the Earth at the magnetic pole regions where Earth's magnetic field is weakest, thus warming the Earth's crust, oceans, and polar ice caps, section 2.2. The research report Cataclysmic Polarity Shift is US National Security Prepared for the Next Geomagnetic Pole Reversal by US Air Force Captain Tyler J. Williams was published in December 2015, endnote 3. According to the report, the Earth's magnetic field had already declined by 40% within 400 years, pages Roman 8, 1 and 7, and by 15% during the last 150 to 200 years, page 7, with a further decline to 10% expected, pages 1 and 14. Permanent magnetic pole reversals have occurred 143 times within the last 40 million years, including an average of one every 250,000 years within the last 25 million years. The last pole shift was the Matuyama-Brunnes event over 780,000 years ago, page 5. The greatest danger associated with a pole shift, as well as with a pole excursion, is that the Earth's magnetic field, as the report suggests, has been weakened for centuries, page 14. The weakening will lead to significant damage from both coronal mass ejections, CMEs, from the Sun and the continuous impact of cosmic radiation on Earth. It is highly likely that Earth will be struck by at least one CME during the period of very weak magnetic field, since the Sun produces one CME per week during its own 11-year-old cycle at a solar minimum and 2 to 3 CMEs per day at solar maximum, page 415. The weakening of the Earth's magnetic field also leads to damage to the ozone layer and to the escape of more oxygen from the atmosphere into space, page 8. Ozone losses in the upper atmosphere reached 40% during the Laschamp event, page 32. Technical damage will primarily result from coronal mass ejection CMEs impacting Earth, but also from the cosmic radiation affecting the Earth. Damage to satellites will lead to outages in, page 16, telephone, GPS, and aircraft navigation, and in, page 19, television and internet services. Military operations will be disrupted by satellite damage impacting communications, including command transmission, page 16, flight operations, page 17, and air defense against intercontinental ballistic missiles, page 17. If a CME of the magnitude of the current event of 1859 were to strike us today, and the Earth's magnetic field were still at enormous strength, the damage would be estimated at $100 billion. However, the Earth's magnetic field is no longer that strong, so the damage would be significantly higher, pages 18 and 19. The damage caused by CMEs to the power grid threatens to throw humanity back to the 18th century, pages 15 and 19. The extent of the damage and the duration of the repairs would depend largely on how many of the estimated 2,000 high-voltage transformers fail, with the report anticipating at least 350 failures, page 20. It estimates the damage from major power outages, even considering energy reserves in batteries and generators for only 7 days, page 21, at least $1 to $2 trillion in the first year alone, pages 20 and 21. Without power, the following would be affected, among other things. Page 20, mains water, gas stations, page 21, government offices, sanitation facilities, page 22, refrigerators, deliveries to supermarkets, electrically controlled irrigation systems, page 24, stock exchanges, supermarkets, and the internet. Prolonged electrical blackouts would also lead to famine and unrest, especially since many Americans only have enough food for 1 week, page 22, and the responsible authorities are insufficiently prepared for a catastrophe of this kind, pages 26 to 27. A CME of the magnitude of a current event occurring under very weak geomagnetic conditions would therefore have the potential to cause tens of millions of deaths in the US alone, pages 23 and 39. According to the report, a 1% decrease in the ozone layer as a consequence of the weakened geomagnetic field corresponds to a 3% increase in skin cancer cases, page 32, and geomagnetic storms increase the number of deaths from heart failure as well as the number of dementia cases, page 32. The increased penetration of UV radiation to Earth also decimates some marine organisms and leads to reduced growth and tissue damage in smaller plants, page 32, thus reducing crop yields. The report recommends, pages 41 to 51, that the US government, as measures to mitigate the damage associated with a magnetic reversal, increase investment in geomagnetism research, real-time observation of the Earth's interior, create disaster preparedness, recovery and risk mitigation plans, establish a global geomagnetic initiative, improve space weather forecasting capabilities, implement federal control of the power grid, strengthen satellites and transformers, and prioritize Earth exploration. The Earth's magnetic field is crucial for national security because without it, no advanced human civilization would ever have developed. Instead, the Earth would resemble Mars. Page 51. 10 years ago, the mass media were aware of the risk that power outages caused by solar storms could jeopardize the cooling of nuclear power plants. The increased risk resulting from the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field must finally be addressed, whether through a nuclear phase-out, nuclear power plants that cannot overheat, or significantly longer lasting grid-independent cooling capacities. Endnote 4. In a groundbreaking work, The Stone Age Paradox, published on August 13, 2022, Dr. Yvonne Stratman provides the first scientific evidence demonstrating the correlation between the mythology, particularly that of the Hopi Indians, and the latest scientific research findings. She specifically highlights the geophysical events that have repeatedly and significantly decimated life on Earth. The Hopi speak metaphorically of a transition to another world, but what they mean is a drastic change on the same planet Earth, requiring a comprehensive rebuilding of civilization. Section 6, The Destruction of Tokpa, the Second World, pages 87 to 127, illuminates the consequences of the Laschamp event, which is what we are currently likely heading towards again in a similar form. Due to its destructive impact, this must have seemed like the end of the world to the people of that time. Page 115. The weakening of the Earth's magnetic field is, quote, one of the main accompanying phenomena of a pole reversal, quote, end page 96. Dr. Stratmann anticipates the next pole reversal, if it occurs, in 100 to 1000 years, page 92, and has doubts as to whether it will happen. However, Dr. Stratmann is not up to date regarding the accelerated decline in Earth's magnetic field strength. Reversals of the Earth's magnetic field have historically been accompanied with periods of cold. Page 94. Once the Earth's magnetic field has fallen to 40% below its current value. Page 95. Depending on the intensity of a coronal mass ejection CME from the Sun directed towards Earth, the affected regions could be set back to the technological level of the 18th century, page 97. During the first phase of the polar excursion of 790 years, from 42,350 to 41,560 years ago, as part of the Laschamp event, the Earth's magnetic field was reduced to between 0% and 6% of its normal strength. In the second phase, lasting 510 years, from 41,560 to 41,050 years ago, pages 97 and 115 to 116, it recovered to 28%, and in the third phase, lasting 250 years, it temporarily fell below 10% again. The Laschamp event led to a sudden and very rapid glaciation of the continents, page 118. During the in total 1,550-year-long Laschamp event, the Sun's magnetic field was also weak, exposing life on Earth to even greater cosmic radiation than the weakness of the Earth's magnetic field alone would ever have caused. Pages 119 to 120. Increased exposure to cosmic radiation during a weak Earth's magnetic field raises the risk of cancer, eye diseases, infertility, genetic damage, and diseases of the nervous system and brain. Page 99. The Laschamp event coincided with the extinction of numerous animal and plant species and the extinction of the Neanderthals, and led to a significant decline in the modern human population. At least once, a magnetic pole reversal had even more severe consequences than the Laschamp event. During periods of weak geomagnetic field associated with magnetic pole reversals, significant oxygen loss to space can occur. This is thought to have led to a 75% loss of biodiversity at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary 200 million years ago, page 98. A fact that, given today's deforestation, underscores the urgent need for a new water paradigm, including reforestation. The very weak geomagnetic field of approximately 41,500 to 41,000 100 years ago, combined with low solar activity at that time, caused changes in Earth's ozone concentration. Even before that magnetic excursion, the megafauna of Australia became extinct during a drought, and in New Zealand and various parts of the Americas, there was increased glacial activity from approximately 42,230 to 11,600 years ago. During the period of weak geomagnetic field, increased UV radiation penetrating the Earth led many people to spend more time in caves. The Neanderthals became extinct between 40,900 and 40,500 years ago. Endnote 5. The study, the role of geomagnetic field intensity in late quaternary evolution of humans and large mammals by G.T. Tranelli and Vigliotti, published on July 6 of 2019 in Reviews of Geophysics, pages 706 and 738, also confirms the connection between the weak geomagnetic field during the Laschamp event and the extinction of the Neanderthals approximately 41,000 years ago, pages 722 to 724. The Earth's magnetic field protects the ozone layer and thus also the oxygen content of the atmosphere, as well as from solar storms, galactic radiation, and UV radiation. Therefore, a weak geomagnetic field leads to a thinning of the ozone layer and consequently a reduction in the protective effect it provides. Pages 710 to 711. There were several periods when many of the largest mammal species of the time became extinct, coinciding with periods of very weak magnetic field due to its reversal process. These periods occurred close to the Laschamp event and at the end of the Quaternary period, the latter called Late Quaternary Extinction (LQE), roughly 13,000 years ago, pages 714 to 716. During the Laschamp event, the megafauna of Australia and the Neanderthals became extinct, while modern humans did not die out, even though they shared some of the same habitats as Neanderthals for between 2,600 and 5,400 years, pages 717 and 718. The study suggests that a major reason for this is that modern humans have a different real hydrocarbon receptor for their cellular metabolism and immune system, including cancer prevention. This made them, among other things, less susceptible to smoke poisoning in caves and allowed them to protect themselves for longer periods than Neanderthals from the much stronger UV radiation that affected living organisms on Earth when the Earth's magnetic field was very weak. Pages 710 and 718 to 719. Endnote 6. According to a NASA graph, the magnetic North Pole moved only a short distance between 1831 and 1904. During the following 68 years, the distance it traveled was considerably greater, and it took only 29 years for it to move roughly the same distance again towards Siberia. The magnetic South Pole moves much more slowly than the North Pole, but it is also accelerating and has now left Antarctica and reached the Indian Ocean. As the Earth's magnetic poles migrate, the Earth's magnetic field is weakening ever more rapidly. Unlike the geographic poles, the magnetic poles are not necessarily opposite to each other. Currently, they are even moving towards each other. According to the study, oxygen escape from the Earth during geomagnetic reversals, implications to mass extinction. A very weak Earth's magnetic field can lead to significant oxygen loss into space and thus to mass extinction. In the past, mass extinctions have correlated with magnetic field reversals. The weakened Earth's magnetic field can also lead to significant flooding. Large-scale power outages caused by energetic effects of solar storms combined with a weak Earth's magnetic field, which can also lead to damage to transformers and power grids requiring years of repair, are more likely than mass extinctions due to oxygen depletion. Note 7. The study relationship between polar motion and key hydrological elements at multiple scales, note 8, by Shanshan Deng and others, published in May 2022 in Science, China Earth Sciences, volume 65, number 5, pages 882 to 898, examines the impact of continental drainage, which the study indicates is 4.68 millimeters per year, page 897, on the shift of the Earth's geographic poles, called pole motion, and thus indirectly also on the magnetic poles, called pole drift. This is because the geographic pole motion influences the direction of magma flows in the Earth's interior, which in turn decisively determine the Earth's magnetic fields, page 888. Hydrological changes on Earth and motions of the geographic poles, that means the Earth's axis of rotation relative to the Earth's crust, mutually influence each other, pages 882 and 896. Regional changes in water volumes on the continents contributed significantly to changes in the direction of the movement of the geographic poles in 2005 and 2012, including the melting of glaciers in Greenland in 2005, page 891. Their movement, in turn, can disrupt the Earth's centrifugal force system to such an extent that equilibrium tides arise, and it influences sea level pressure, wind, and vapor transport, page 882. The hydrological changes that contribute to the motion of the geographic poles are almost identical to the drainage of the continents, page 888. A global motion of the geographic poles due to drainage occurred in 2011, pages 888 and 891. In the 1990s, the direction and speed of movement of the geographic poles were largely determined by continental drainage, including excessive groundwater use and glacial melt, page 890. According to the study, continental drainage and glacial melt are also the main factors, more so than the ocean and the atmosphere, for the drift of the Earth's magnetic poles, pages 890 and 894. The effect of the continental drainage on the drift of the Earth's magnetic poles is shown in figure 3 on page 890. Earthquakes also affect the movement of the Earth's magnetic poles, page 896, but less so than continental drainage and glacial melt. The change in the direction of the Earth's magnetic north pole in the 1990s was primarily caused by the drainage of the continents. And note 9. That mass changes on the Earth's surface on the scale of those caused by glacial melt are a trigger for earthquakes is also confirmed by the article Climate Change and Seismicity by Professor Dr. Andrea Hampel in the journal FZ Geo of the Leibniz University Hanover, and note 10. The magnitude 8.9 earthquake off the coast of Japan in 2011 had global repercussions. It shifted Japan 2.5 meters westward and 0.5 meters downward, shifted the Earth's axis of figure by 16 to 17 centimeters, and increased the Earth's rotational speed, reducing the time it takes to complete one rotation by 1.8 microseconds. Endnote 11. This demonstrates that earthquakes in turn affect the Earth's position and thus magma flows. For the primary cause of the global shift of the geographic poles, in brackets, drainage of the continents, in 2011, see above. There is a correlation between increased cosmic radiation on the one hand and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on the other. While the Earth's magnetic field weakens ever more rapidly due to its drift towards magnetic pole reversal, the Sun's magnetic field strength changes in shorter cycles. When the magnetic fields of both Earth and Sun are weak, cosmic radiation can reach the Earth most unimpeded, thus increasing the frequency of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Endnotes 12, 13, and 14. According to a lecture by Professor Dr. Valentina Zarkova, she predicts that between 2020 and 2053, the Earth will experience impacts such as a significant reduction in the ozone layer, increased cloud cover, changes in the direction of the jet streams, intensified exposure to cosmic radiation, increased volcanic activity and earthquakes, and a shortening of the growing season between 2028 and 2042, which could lead to food shortages. She argues that stronger intergovernmental cooperation is necessary to prevent such disasters, page 36. During the Little Ice Age between 1680 and 1780, the reduction of ozone due to UV radiation in the stratosphere significantly intensified glaciation, and changes in the jet streams allowed for a further spread of polar cold air, pages 31 to 32. Large volcanic eruptions at high latitudes can lead to unusually cold decades due to the amount of sulfate released into the stratosphere, which reflects sunlight. Endnotes 15, 16, and 17. According to the report on the progression of natural disasters on Earth and their devastating consequences, Endnote 18, by Alatra, in 1995, the magnetic North Pole suddenly changed its direction of movement towards Siberia and increased its speed from 10 kilometers per year to 55 kilometers per year, page 48, its greatest speed in 10,000 years, page 48. In 1995, also the direction of the Earth's rotational axis changed and its rotational speed increased until 2005, then decreased again until 2016, before increasing abruptly once more, so that in 2023 a day is approximately 3 milliseconds shorter than in 1995, page 41 in figure 59. From 1900 to 2000, the Earth's magnetic field weakened by 10% to 15%, the most significant weakening in the last 12,000 to 13,000 years, page 49. The report attributes this to additional energizing of the Earth's core from outside the Earth, page 50. Satellite data from 1997 and 1998 revealed a sudden shift of the inner core towards the Taimyr Peninsula in Siberia, page 52, with the size of the Earth's core being comparable to that of the Moon, page 54. Since 1995, seismic and volcanic activity, including the formation of larger magma plumes, has intensified, the ocean has warmed from below, and extreme weather events have increased, page 55. Climate changes and increased seismic and volcanic activity have also been observed on the other planets and moons of our solar system, pages 57 to 66. The report suggests that the additional energizing of the cores of the planet and moons of our solar system is caused by cosmic influences and not by our sun, as the sun was at a minimum in activity in 1995, page 67. Based on ice cores, quaternary sediments, and past extinction events, the report suggests that a catastrophic cycle repeats itself on Earth approximately every 12,000 to 13,000 years. Based on model calculations, Alatra fears that exponential increase in seismic activity observed up to the time of the report will continue to develop exponentially, potentially leading to catastrophic eruptions of both the magma plume beneath Siberia, pages 71 to 73, and by 2036, the Mariana Trench, pages 77 to 78. Alatra identifies the pollution of the oceans with micro and nanoplastics, page 75, as a primary anthropogenic factor exacerbating the crisis, as this reduces the ocean's thermal conductivity and thus significantly intensifies volcanism and the formation of magma plumes. According to the Alatra report, unknown cosmic source energizing the cores of the planets and moons in our solar system appears to lie in the cyclical and most recently in the 1990s entry of our solar system into the cosmic cloud formed by a supernova, as suggested by the study by Professor Dr. Mitriev, see above. The duration of a cycle of 12,000 to 13,000 years, as modeled by Alatra, does not seem to quite fit the time gap between the Laschamp event and today. Unfortunately, Alatra does not include into its analysis the consequences of deforestation, drainage, and land sealing on extreme weather events as described in the new water paradigm and note 19, and also on even the acceleration of magnetic flux. Thus, Alatra perhaps attributes too large a portion of the consequences to the energizing of the Earth's core and the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field. The weakening of the Earth's magnetic field also has serious effects on the human psyche because people are then hardly protected from solar storms whose energetic impact reaches Earth and from cosmic radiation. Exposure to solar storms can promote fear and aggression and lead to public unrest. End note 20. Exposure to cosmic radiation can lead to dementia and cognitive impairment and reduce the ability to suppress unpleasant memories. In mouse experience, it damaged nerve cells and caused encephalitis within 6 months. End note 21. The Nature scientific report article Cosmic Radiation Exposure and Persistent Cognitive Dysfunction, end note 22, of October the 10th of 2016, examines in detail the neuronal and psychological damage that cosmic radiation causes in mice and warns of potentially similar damage in humans. They discovered impairments in short time and spatial memory, a reduced ability to differentiate between known and unknown objects, slowed anxiety processing, reduced density and dendritic complexity of nerve cells, and cognitive impairments. Some possible solutions. The human-caused part of climate change is primarily due to deforestation, drainage, and sealing of land surfaces on the continents. It is a major contributor to extreme weather events, desertification, and sea level rise. The problem is not CO2, but rather the reduced photosynthesis resulting from deforestation. The new water paradigm by Dr. Michal Krawczyk and others in 2007, endnote 23, encompassing water retention, reforestation, and groundwater replenishment, is not only essential for preserving the climate and for ensuring global food security, but its urgency has also been demonstrated by the fact that continental dewatering has accelerated magnetic reversal. Reforestation and the restoration of natural water cycles on land are among the most urgent and effective measures to compensate for the loss of forest and agricultural land due to the increased earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, as well as the anticipated loss of oxygen to space due to the weakening Earth's magnetic field. Replenishing groundwater reserves as part of the new water paradigm could also be crucial for strengthening the planet's cooling capacity. ALLATRA also focuses on strengthening groundwater reserves, but primarily on atmospheric water generators to filter micro and nanoplastics from condensation and from precipitation, thus ensuring drinking water supplies this way instead of relying on groundwater. Sufficient reserves of cash, water, food, fuel, medicine, batteries, etc. are needed to address the anticipated increase of power outages. Sufficient rapid disaster relief capacities are needed to resolve power outages and provide assistance during earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and extreme weather events. Schumann resonance generators for creating the normal Earth frequency on a personal, respective room basis contribute to the protection of the human body and mind. Increased diplomacy is required to compensate for the disruptions in communication, flight control, and air defense expected due to the weakening of the Earth's magnetic field. Armageddon aspirations. The Armageddon story exists in various versions in the three Abrahamic religions, as well as in Satanism and Freemasonry. It includes a time of suffering, a final battle, bracket open at least in the Abrahamic religions with the arrival of the Messiah, bracket closed, and finally a 1,000-year world reign of peace. Most believers remain cautious about whether and when these prophecies will be fulfilled, because they respect the preservation of creation and would consider any human attempts to fulfill the prophecy of Armageddon final battle as blasphemous and presumptuous. Unfortunately, some religious groups feel compelled to enforce its implementation. As a so-called Anglo-Saxon mission, a Masonic variant of the aspiration for a final battle, demonstrates it is supposed to take place before a specific geophysical event. That means before the next magnetic pole reversal, which also explains the increase in concrete aspirations for a final battle in the current era of a weakening geomagnetic field. There is no such thing as a final battle in the Hopi mythology. Masonic and Satanic visions of the final battle. According to US Senator and Satanist Robert C. Byrd, speaking to Casey O'Brien and her daughter Kelly O'Brien, mind control, blackmail, and money laundering are intended to lead humanity into an accelerated development of a, quote, new world order, quote, end, meaning world domination, as the, quote, world peace, quote, end, described in the Bible, that means into the 1,000-year reign after the final battle, here from a satanic perspective. Casey O'Brien is one of the survivors of Project Monarch, part of the mind manipulation and torture research program MKUltra. Victims for Project Monarch were also procured by satanic groups, and victims of this project were lent out as slaves to top politicians, among others from USA, Canada, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Saudi Arabia, and simultaneously used to create compromising material for the benefit of the CIA under Herbert Walker Bush, who also served as His Excellency, the Vice President, under His Excellency President Ronald Reagan, and later as His Excellency the President of the USA. The information provided by Robert C. Byrd demonstrates the danger that such compromising material is being misused for satanic Armageddon-like aspirations. Endnote 24. Freemasonry also harbors aspirations to realize the Armageddon final battle, strangely enough, with some overlap in personnel with corresponding movements in other religions and ideologies. In his speech on December 15 of 1984 at a Major Lodge anniversary, Henri L. Baranger, Sovereign Grand Commander of the French Supreme Council of Freemasons, stated that the, quote, ultimate purpose, quote, end of Freemasonry is, quote, eschatological in nature, quote, end. He spoke of the, quote, realization of the Holy Kingdom for which we work with all our strength with God's help, quote, end, and saw his order as, quote, a co-worker of divinity, quote, end, saying, quote, point, this order which demands our strength and points to that heavenly Jerusalem revealed to the spiritual patron of the Rite, the unsigned man inspired by Patmos, point, quote, end. The Jewish Freemason Aaron Monus viewed Freemasonry and also Mr. Baranger's statements as being connected to Jewish Armageddon concepts and directed also against Christianity. Endnote 25. Syed Qutb, from 1906 to 1966, published an article entitled Why I Became a Freemason in the magazine Al-Taj Al-Masri, Crown of Egypt, on April 23rd of 1943. Later, Qutb traveled to the USA and became the most important ideologue of the Muslim Brotherhood. This was revealed in a new biography on him by the Egyptian historian Helmi Nimnim. Endnote 26. The high-ranking Freemason Albert Pike, USA, who was also a Satanist, presented a geostrategy for establishing a single world empire through 3 world wars in a letter dated August 15 of 1871 to his Italian Freemason colleague Giuseppe Mazzini. According to his vision, the first event was to destroy Tsarist rule in Russia and strengthen the influence of Freemasonry there. The second was to pit German nationalism against Zionism, strengthen Russia's influence, and lead to the founding of the State of Israel. The third was to be triggered between Zionists and Arabs. Following this, unrest was to be created by atheists and nihilists, discrediting these groups. As the next step, he predicted, quote, point, the majority of people being believers in God will, disillusioned by Christianity and therefore without guidance, anxiously search for a new ideal without knowing whom or what to worship. Then they will be ready to receive the pure light through the worldwide proclamation of Lucifer's true doctrine, which can finally be brought into the public eye. A manifestation that will be a result of the general reactionary movement that will follow the destruction of Christianity and of atheism. Quote end note 27. In early 2010, Project Avalon published an interview with an anonymous Masonic whistleblower, which, despite the interviewer's anonymity, is to be taken seriously due to numerous matches with actual events. He stated that he held an important position in the city of London and within Freemasonry there. He claimed that in June 2005, he had been mistakenly invited to a meeting in which, among other things, concrete plans, the so-called Anglo-Saxon mission to carry out the Armageddon final battle against Iran were discussed under the pretext that Iran was striving to develop nuclear weapons. At the meeting, there was concern about falling behind schedule and that His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu was not prepared to attack Iran at that time in 2005. The Anglo-Saxon mission entailed escalation leading to the total destruction of Iran and of Israel and a limited nuclear war between the West and China. Following the ceasefire with China, the plan was to covertly attack the country with genetically modified flu viruses, primarily killing Chinese people. The overall goal was to roughly halve the world's population through a limited nuclear war and a biological attack on China, bracket open, as well as through further measures, question mark, bracket close. In the West, the centralization of large financial resources into private hands and a coup option through the functional privatization of internal security were planned. All these steps were to be implemented before a specific called a quote geophysical event quote end, which the whistleblower anticipated would occur within 5 to 20 years from the perspective of 2010. This would be between 2015 and 2030 in order to establish a suitable starting position for the period after this event, which occurs approximately in every 11,500 years and could lead to another halving of the world's population. The whistleblower stated that he suspected the geophysical event was a shift of the Earth's crust by 30 degrees or 2,800 to 3,700 kilometers to the south. Regarding the function of the June 2005 meeting, he said it was a purely executive group and that Freemasonry's infrastructure was being used to determine who could be trusted to participate in such endeavors. Endnote 28. In 2005, there were indeed efforts to attack Iran. For example, some US participants at the 2005 Bilderberg Conference, during a discussion moderated by Henry Kissinger, advocated for an attack on Iran, whereupon they were warned by some European participants. Endnote 29. The parallels to actual financial events can be found in the global financial crisis, the national bank bailout programs, and the four mechanisms of the Eurozone with the Troika, including the ESM. The most important steps regarding the privatization of sovereign institutions, also called non-economic services of general interest, of the EU member states are found in Article 2 of Protocol 26 to the EU treaties, in point 19 of the TTIP negotiation mandate, and in the sovereign insolvency procedure of the ESM, to be found in Article 12 of the ESM Treaty in conjunction with sections 4A to 4K of the German Federal Act on the Management of the Public Debts, is also geared towards the privatization of sovereign institutions. The whistleblower statement clearly shows that the Armageddon-like final battle efforts are temporarily aligned with the cyclically recurring magnetic reversal, even though he is likely not entirely correct about the exact duration of a cycle and the precise nature of the event. The connection he suggests of Masonic aspirations for a final battle of Armageddon with Anglo-Saxon imperialism and with ideas of a supposed Anglo-Saxon race is also plausible. Firstly, Great Britain is one of the world's most important centers of Freemasonry. Secondly, according to Jacob Nordengaard's book, The Global Coup d'etat, Corp Publishing House 2025, the goal of creating one single world empire is also part of the ideology of British imperialism, with the idea that all fertile land should be under British control, be socially reformed, and ruled by the quote higher morality quote end of a supposed genetically superior British elite, thereby creating a perfect society, a kingdom of God on earth, pages 13 to 14. Cecil Rhodes, Lord Milner, and Arthur Toynbee founded the Round Table movement for this purpose, page 14. The think tanks, Chatham House, 1919, and CFR, 1921, were founded by members of the Round Table movement, page 15. John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie also shared the vision of world government, page 16, and used their foundations, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, for this purpose. The establishment of the CFR and of Chatham House was also a means of connecting them with the Round Table movement, page 15. In 1992, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace think tank created the ideology of the so-called humanitarian intervention through its study Self-Determination in the New World Order, which advocates supporting revolutions in other countries in the name of human rights, even to the point of wars of aggression using human rights as a pretext. New World Order clearly exhibits apocalyptic undertones. For color revolutions in other countries, the National Endowment for Democracy was created in the USA, which for many years had the same chairman as the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Final battle visions of the Muslim Brotherhood and its affiliates Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Hamas. According to point 5 of its strategy adopted on December the 1st of 1982, discovered during a raid in Switzerland in 2001, but not published until 2006, the Muslim Brotherhood strives for a global caliphate. The paper does not specify a concrete year by which this is to be achieved. Endnote 30. The ideology of Al-Qaeda was created by the Muslim Brotherhood. Endnote 31. The Muslim Brotherhood members Osama bin Laden from Saudi Arabia and Dr. Abdullah Azzam from Palestine were the first two members of the Al-Qaeda's precursor, Maqta al-Qidamat, endnote 32. ISIS was originally called Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which reveals its ideological orientation. Endnote 33. ISIS wanted to bring about the final battle of Armageddon near the Syrian town of Dabiq, after which an ISIS online magazine is also named, and then establish the global caliphate by 2020. Endnotes 34 and 35. Al-Qaeda wanted to bring about the final battle of Armageddon and then establish the global caliphate by 2020. Endnotes 36 and 37. Hamas, founded by the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza, is striving for the Armageddon final battle to liberate Jerusalem and save the Al-Aqsa Mosque, thus mirroring final battle aspirations from the Jewish and Christian spheres. For example, Hamas called its terrorist attack on October 7th of 2023 at a peaceful Israeli music event Al-Aqsa Flood. Jewish conceptions of the final battle. In his 1949 book, Gog and Magog, Professor Martin Buber explained that Chassidism holds the view that a final battle brought about by humans is necessary for the Messiah to appear. Quote, the world of nations, ... is in turmoil, and we cannot want it to cease, for only when the world breaks apart in convulsions will the pangs of the Messiah begin. Redemption is not a ready-made gift from God, lowered from heaven to earth. In great pain, the body of the world must labor, it must come to the brink of death before it can be born. ... We ourselves must work to ensure that the struggle intensifies into the pangs of the Messiah. ... Quote end note 38. The Chabad-Lubavitch branch of Judaism also holds the belief that the final battle of Armageddon must be brought about so that the Messiah can appear. Thus, after the start of the Second Gulf War, with Iraq's attack on Kuwait on August 2nd of 1990, the spiritual leader Menahem Schneerson described the events in the Gulf as a, quote, harbinger of the Messiah's arrival, quote, end later that same month. End note 39. The prophet Ezekiel, Ezekiel 39 1 and 39 13 and 21 in 587 before Christ envisioned the final battle of Armageddon as a victory of Israel over Gog from the land of Magog in the north and over the states allied with Gog, among them, for example, quote, Persia, Ethiopia, and Put, quote end. With God himself intervening in the war through natural disasters such as earthquakes, rain, hail, fire, and brimstone raining down upon Magog, and with a plague. End note 40. Today, efforts within Judaism to bring about the final battle focus primarily on the demolition of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the site of Muhammad's ascension, and the third holiest mosque in Islam, followed by the construction of the third temple, with the destruction of this mosque intended to provoke the final battle of Armageddon against Islam. Since 2017, there has been a significant increase in provocations by Jewish extremists at the Al-Aqsa site. Mike Pence, a Christian Zionist, and at the time, His Excellency, the US Vice President, during the first term of His Excellency, US President Donald Trump, also wants the demolition of Al-Aqsa and the construction of the Third Temple, end note 41. His Excellency, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as numerous Israeli members of parliament, also support the effort to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and build the Third Temple. That is this path to provoke an Armageddon. The majority of Orthodox Jews, however, already consider it forbidden for Jews to enter the Temple Mount, a view upheld in numerous court rulings. Sheldon Adelson, one of the major donors to His Excellency, US President Donald Trump, also supports the destruction of Al-Aqsa and the construction of the Third Temple. Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, head of Chabad-Lubavitch movement, announced that His Excellency, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, would hand over his keys to the Third Temple to the Messiah. End note 42. Caspar Weinberger, then US Secretary of Defense, and under His Excellency, then US President Ronald Reagan, told the Globe and Mail that the final battle of Armageddon would begin on Megiddo Hill, about 15 miles southeast of Haifa, end note 43. In the context of the US and Israeli war of aggression against Iran in 2026, His Excellency Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu compared the Iranians to the Amalekites. He said this in this context, quote, "In the weekly Torah portion, we read, 'Remember what Amalek did to you.' We remember and we act," quote end. The Bible claims that God commanded the extermination of all Amalekites, and note 44. An official of the Iranian intelligence service warned that Israel might attack the Al-Aqsa Mosque in a false flag operation to blame Iran and incite the Muslim public against Iran. End note 45. Christian visions of the final battle. The religious movement within Christianity that seeks to bring about the final battle of Armageddon is called Christian Zionism. His Excellency, then US President Ronald Reagan, anticipated Armageddon in his lifetime in the early 1980s, and he envisioned it involving nuclear weapons. End note 46. In August 1984, as governor of Texas, he explained to Representative John Mills, quote, "Everything is falling apart. It can't be long now. ... Ezekiel says that fire and brimstone will rain down on the enemies of God. This must mean that they will be destroyed by nuclear weapons. They exist now, and they never existed before." Quote end. End note 47. Ronald Reagan believed that Gog referred to the Soviet Union. End note 48. On the eve of the US attack on Iraq in 2003, His Excellency, then US President George W. Bush, anticipated Armageddon, which he explained to His Excellency, then French President Jacques Chirac. End note 49. In 2003, Christian televangelist Dr. Jacques Van Impe was commissioned by Condoleezza Rice, then White House Public Affairs, to draw up an Armageddon timeline. End note 50. Professor Dr. Georges Monbiot explained in The Guardian in 2004 that in the USA, quote, "millions of people have fallen victim to an extraordinary deception," quote end, because, quote, "in the 19th century, two immigrant preachers pieced together a series of unconnected Bible passages to create a seemingly coherent narrative," quote end. This narrative included the idea that Jesus would return to earth when the Al-Aqsa Mosque was demolished and the third temple built there, which would lead to an attack by the, quote, "legions of the Antichrist," quote end, and thus to the final battle of Armageddon. His article also shows that the final battle aspirations of Christian Zionism often don't even include respect for the Jews. Quote, "Then the legions of the Antichrist will march, and their war will culminate in the valley of Armageddon. The Jews of the Holy Land will either be burned to ashes or convert to Christianity, and the Messiah will return to earth." What makes this story so appealing to Christian fundamentalists is the detail that before the start of the great decisive battle, all true believers will be stripped of their clothes and carried to heaven in an event called rapture. Quote end note 51. The Christian Zionist Jerry Falwell imagines the rapture as follows. At the sounding of the trumpets for Armageddon, Christians would be immediately reborn in heaven, leaving behind only all material possessions and everything that could not have eternal life, while all other people would remain exposed to the events on earth. End note 52. Overlaps between Christian Zionism and neoconservatives in the USA were evident, for example, in the fall of 2003 at a conference in Jerusalem to save the West by aligning it with Israel, with participants including their excellencies Benjamin Netanyahu, Mr. Lieberman, and Ehud Olmert, and Richard Pearl, American Enterprise Institute and Project for a New American Century, as well as Elliot Abrams. According to that conference, and note 50, and note 53. The source for this is the book of Thierry Messon, Before Our Very Eyes. Thierry Messon sees the function of the Wolfowitz doctrine not only in the role of the USA as a world policeman, but also as a step towards bringing about the final battle of Armageddon, beginning in the Middle East, then in Europe, and also as a revenge against those who had previously harmed Jews. The ideology of Christian Zionism also includes dispensationalism, developed by the English-Irish preacher John Nelson Darby in the 1820s, which, among other things, includes the belief that Christians would be raptured from earth after the construction of the Third Temple, although theologians of various denominations have pointed out that this rapture has no basis in the Bible. Christian Zionism, including dispensationalism, gained wider acceptance among evangelicals in the USA through the biblical commentary by Cyrus Scofield, who had no theological training but who had become a preacher after being forced to abandon his practice as a lawyer amid allegations of bribery, forgery, and embezzlement of campaign funds. The Christian Zionist organization Christians United for Israel, CUFI, has 2 million members compared to 7 million evangelicals in the USA as a whole, and is associated with people such as Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, John Bolton, John McCain, Elliot Abrams, and Sheldon Adelson. His Excellency Mike Pompeo, during his tenure as Secretary of State, was influenced by Christian Zionist ideology. He considered it possible that His Excellency, US President Donald Trump, had been sent by God to protect Israel from Iran. He also supported the demolition of the Al-Aqsa Mosque for the construction of the Third Jewish Temple. Supporters of the Third Temple also include Trump advisors Jared Kushner, who is also Trump's son-in-law and is involved in negotiations with Iran in 2026, and Jason Greenblatt, as well as David Friedman, then His Excellency the US Ambassador to Israel. Endnote 54. Complaints are mounting from within the US military to the NGO Military Religious Freedom Foundation, MRFF, alleging that many US soldiers are being indoctrinated by their superiors with the idea that the war against Iran was to bring about Armageddon or the biblical, quote, end of times, quote, end. That the war begun in 2026 by the US and Israel against Iran is, quote, part of God's divine plan, quote, end, in relation to Armageddon and the second coming of Christ, and that His Excellency, President Donald Trump, was, quote, chosen by Jesus, quote, end, to, quote, light the signal fire in Iran to bring about Armageddon and mark his return to earth, quote, end. At the same time, His Excellency, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio claims that Iran is, quote, ruled by lunatics, religious fanatics, quote, end, who have, quote, the ambition to possess nuclear weapons, quote, end. His Excellency, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, claims that the Iranian government is, quote, obsessed with prophetic Islamic delusions, quote, end, even though he himself is responsible, at least through inaction, for the Armageddon-style indoctrination of US soldiers against Iran. John Haig, chairman of the largest Christian Zionist organization CUFI, was even more explicit, predicting that the war with Iran will escalate into the final battle of Armageddon, in which, besides Iran, Russia, Turkey, and other Islamic groups will also be destroyed. Endnote 55. Ali Larijani, the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, has warned that he, quote, has heard that the remaining members of Epstein's network have hatched a conspiracy to stage an incident similar to 9/11 and blame Iran for it, quote end. He emphasized that Iran rejects, quote, terrorist activities, quote end, and is, quote, not waging war against the American people, quote end, but is solely defending itself against aggression from US and Israel. End note 56. RT Deutsch, citing The Guardian, reports that during the 12-day war of aggression against Iran in 2025, the US government, or rather experts involved in advising it, considered attacking Iranian nuclear power plants not only with conventional weapons, but also with nuclear weapons. However, at that time, they decided against using nuclear weapons due to potential image risks. This also aligns with the statement by His Excellency, US President Donald Trump, that the US, quote, could make Iran uninhabitable forever within an hour because we have the weapons to do it, quote, end note 57. Misunderstandings and cargo. The rapture describes a perfectly normal dying process in which the soul leaves the human body just as it enters the body at the beginning of life. People with near-death experiences report that their perception has left the body and then returned to it. The soul seems to correspond to perception. This also fits with Carl Gustav Jung's layered model of the human psyche, according to which perception is the center of human psyche. Thus, Christian Zionism, with its dispensationalism, promises to all Christians death before the final battle of Armageddon. Fire falling from the sky, along with sulfur, likely refers to volcanic eruptions, as these had occurred even before Hezekiel's times, unlike nuclear missiles. An increased number of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions also falls within the temporal context of the magnetic shift, suggesting that even the Armageddon story, as presented by Hezekiel, was inspired by humanity's experiences with an earlier magnetic shift. Several figures in the Hadith, including Abu Huraira, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abu Zar, Al-Qurtubi, Abdullah ibn Amr, Imran ibn Husayn, and Abdullah ibn Mas, state that the sun will rise in the west before the day of judgment. Endnotes 58 and 59. Earthquakes are also mentioned as omens of Armageddon. Endnotes 60 and 61. The Hadiths are traditions of sayings, actions, and tacit approvals by the Prophet of Islam that were not included into the Quran. The natural scientific explanation for this is that after a shift in the Earth's magnetic north and south poles, the sun will rise in the direction the compass will then indicate as magnetic west, though it's still geographically east. This shows that the Muslim Armageddon narrative is inspired by experiences of a previous magnetic shift. Increased earthquake activity associated with a weakened increased earthquake activity is associated with a weakened Earth's magnetic field. According to the Wikipedia entry on Gog and Magog, they appear in many final battle myths. Sometimes Gog is described as an individual from the land of Magog, while at other times Gog and Magog are seen as two hostile peoples. Depending on the country, religion, and era, there have been a wide variety of speculations about which peoples Gog and Magog might represent, including the Romans, the Goths, the Scythians, the Sarmatians and Alans, the Huns, the Avars and Magyars, the Turks, the Khazars, the Mongols and Tatars, the Babylonians, the Vikings, the 10 lost tribes of Israel, Portuguese and Dutch colonizers of Indonesia, the Chinese, the French under Napoleon, during their attack on Russia, the Russians, especially during the Soviet era, and the Iranians. Endnote 62. The variability and almost arbitrariness of the interpretation of Gog and Magog demonstrate that the final battle myth has often been instrumentalized against peoples perceived as threats or whom one wished to attack. The question arises whether Gog and Magog themselves were inspired by conflicts from the time of an earlier magnetic shift or even before. Cargo cults are apocalyptic religious movements that arose from misunderstandings arising from the confrontation with cultures that appear technologically, economically, or militarily superior. Believers in cargo cults attempt to bring about the end-time returns of their ancestors through symbolic acts, hoping they will be blessed with riches or be liberated. Several cargo cults have formed in Melanesia, constructing model airplanes, warehouses, and replicas of runways and radio masts, and performing specific rituals. They hope that, with the help of their ancestors, airplanes will return bringing valuable goods, just as Western occupiers did during World War II, but exploiting the indigenous population instead of sharing with them. With the help of these eschatologically returning ancestors, these goods are then supposed to benefit the natives and usher in a time of prosperity. The Native American ghost dance movement in North America is also an apocalyptic cargo cult, a reaction to the military and technological superiority of white settlers. It involves the belief that certain religious dances would allow the ancestors to return on railway tracks and that a new earth would then engulf the white pressures. In Brazil, indigenous people carved wooden models of cassette recorders in hope of communicating with spirits. Endnote 63. Even the mere feeling of being at the mercy of technologically, economically, or militarily superior cultures coupled with demonstrable misunderstandings has led to new apocalyptic narratives. Therefore, it is plausible that the even deeper impression of the decimation of humanity of a humanity that was unprepared or inadequately prepared for disasters during a previous reversal of the Earth's magnetic field inspired the Armageddon story. The narrative of the final battle reminds of the apocalyptic hope for the return of the ancestors who are supposed to liberate humanity from its oppressors. Perhaps the story arose from the experience of resource conflicts in the face of the destruction caused by earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and other natural disasters of that era. It could also be that people fought against each other under fear-inducing increased exposure to cosmic radiation during a weakened geomagnetic field. The Hopi Indians managed to process the experience of the geomagnetic reversal in a religiously constructive way, focusing on the preservation of life without incorporating any aspirations for a final battle. In this respect, they are far more advanced than some of today's world religions. Now I want to mention two strong signals of hope from the Christian sphere after having read out the article. According to the newspaper Münchner Merkur, His Holiness Papst Leo the 14th has said on Palm Sunday of 2026, I retransfer into English, do not listen to the prayers of those who are waging war, quote end. And he quoted Isaiah 1:15, quote, even even one moment. As much as you may pray, I don't hear you. Your hands are full of blood, quote end. And Sputnik News has reported on April the 5th of 2026 that Arkady Mahler, who is a member of the Synodal Bible and Theological Commission of the Russian Orthodox Church, has said, quote, translated into English, true Christians who truly confess to Christian belief will never um, praise masses of violence and will never call for apocalyptic battles. Quote end. Many thanks for your attention.